What's up, ladies and gents? Third time lucky. We're going to make sure that you can hear me, see me, and we're ready to get straight into it. I wanted to go through some really interesting stuff tonight. If you don't already know, I decided to do a full Superman off the motorbike, slightly not voluntarily, and banged up my shoulder in the weekend, hence the sling. And from that experience, there's a couple of things that I'd like to go through with you today that hopefully are going to be really helpful. There was obviously some huge insight in there that I think we can take away from that allows us to look at how we can really take charge of our own health. And some of those insights are both good and bad, that if they're valuable for you, that'd be fantastic, just to get a little bit more awareness around what some of those key aspects that I think they're doing really well, and some of the ones that I think are missing that we have to really take care of ourselves, really make sure that we do take charge of our own health so that things are back on track. Okay, so we'll get straight into it and bring it up on the screen. Just make sure if you are watching this, if you're watching live, comment live. If you're watching the replay, please watch replay. It'd be or comment replay. It'd be great to see that you are seeing it. And we'll dive right in. Okay, so the big one here is getting the awareness around this one quote, and it came up on my social media this morning. I can't remember who posted it, but I think it really sums up maybe a part of the conversation today, to make sure that things are doing. You're doing your very best to really understand where that line is really drawn. Okay, the root cause of pain and disease isn't in the absence of medical care. Okay, it's a tool, it's an asset, it's certainly there for a reason, but there's some key parts today I want to make sure that we can dive into to get some clarity around what really matters and what you should be doing to look after your own health, your own well-being, to make sure you don't get into the situations that typically do not end well once you're in the hospital. Okay, so what I want to cover today is getting awareness of these three things. So first, I want to just go over a little bit what happened to me in the weekend. What was that wee hiccup that I went through on Sunday that meant that I was in the hospital staying the night on Sunday night to be discharged on Monday morning. My observations around how it was run, some tweaks and adjustments around really getting a huge insight and how that place ran in a full 24 hours. And then my takeaways, things that hopefully you can really get an awareness of, getting things on your side, really making sure that your body, you are looking after it, you're taking charge of your own health. Okay, so this is a wee photo. It's a bit sobering for me. That happened as of Sunday. So that's me lying on the ground with my top cut off me because I was not able to move. I was at the track. So we went up on the motorbike track in the weekend, zooming around, having a good time. And unfortunately, after 3 or 4 cycles of that, getting to the afternoon, my brakes entirely failed. So what happened, I believe, is that the brake fluid in the thing got way too hot, just completely malfunctioned, and coming down the straight, 150, 180k, after trying to brake, hit the barrier, which is on the other side of this hill, and what I decided, split-second decision, last minute, was actually either do I hit the dirt and roll into the wall, or do I go head on and do my best to try and jump at the last second and try save myself, right? What the result was is I did pretty well. I managed to the bike obviously hit the wall. I jumped and I managed to go 25 meters over the whole thing, right? So you can see there's the hill there. There was a ditch. There's that gate. That fence, and that's where I landed, like literally right next to the road. Okay, so huge crash, and all these guys were like, "How the hell are you still breathing or even alive?" And the result, really, at the end of the day, was all I broke was potentially a scapular or glenohumeral. I'll find out on Tuesday, and dislocated my shoulder. Okay, so they were obviously quite worried about my neck. It's a bit tight, but still doing okay. And like I said, this is just last Sunday, right? So like 4 days ago. Hips, legs, everything else. Obviously, everything's pretty bang and bruised, but nothing is broken other than that dislocated shoulder. So huge part to that obviously plays the quick thinking of that last minute jump. And as you're having some protective, clothing from both the motorcycle gear and also holding a bit of muscle mass to keep everything together. And I've been invited into another podcast in a couple of weeks around this, realizing that muscle can be a hugely important protective mechanism. You don't have huge amounts of it, but when you're strong and stable and you're protecting those joints, situations like this tend to go a lot better. So you can also get awareness of how far that truly is. Like there's a good 25 meters in how I flew to get to that position. All right. So the reason I'm telling you all that and going through that rather insane story from just last Sunday is because, like I said, I was obviously taken to the hospital and I stayed the night at the Palmerston North Oversight Care Facility. Now, there were some really, really cool parts to that I found both interesting and maybe worrying that I want to go through today. And the first one is this awareness of reactive versus proactive, right? So the first responders, the ones that were on the scene and taking me through getting that initial, getting my shoulder back in place and all the rest. To be honest, I think they did a fantastic job. Just the way that moved, that level of urgency, obviously the drugs are involved, all these things. They generally had their shit together pretty well, and I think that went really, really well. But the interesting part is how that commenced over the night shift and how that sort of, as the dust settled, how I saw that place run. And a big thing that I want to dive really deep into today that hopefully give you a huge amount of awareness with your own health is this awareness around food and how hugely it should play a massive role in the healing process, where in a medical system or hospital, it's entirely disregarded. And there's some really, really key aspects I want to touch on there that would be really, really important to get an awareness of. The awareness to go further from that one is this obesity versus so the obesity that equals unhealthy, and realizing that even if you're fit, there's a level of health that needs to be taken into consideration. And then the last one here is with those patch fixes. So really getting awareness of what that looks like with looking at the root cause, right? If your body's not feeling great, you don't feel like you're responding your best, and you're on certain medications, you're constantly going to professionals and doctors and not understanding why things are missing, then hopefully this can be something that can be helpful to dive into a little bit more, okay? So the first one I'll touch on is this awareness of reactive versus proactive, right? At the end of the day, you are responsible for your own health. Nobody should care more than you. Now, sometimes the problem is some people do, right? People are just waiting until things break and then they'll get the doctor or they'll get the physio or something to come in and fix. And that is always a reactive way of looking at your body and your health, and you will always lose, right? You'll be on medications, you'll be having surgeries, you'll be constantly in pain or not functioning at best because you're not taking that time and responsibility to look after your own body. And this is really, really huge that we're seeing, staying overnight. I was lucky enough to be in the room with 3 or 4 other guys that are all in there for various different reasons, right? One, I believe, was diabetic. One had just had a hip surgery. And the other one, I think, had broken his leg. And how they conducted themselves and how the nurses kind of worked around them was really, really interesting to see, right? Because there were some of them that were taking the time they wanted to get out, they wanted to really look after their health, they wanted to make sure these things were really functioning. So they were asking certain questions, they were doing the things they needed to do in order to make sure they could heal, okay? Whereas the other part to that were they would do, they were having lollies, they were on the screen all night, they weren't even sleeping, they weren't trying to recover, right? And they were having to be forced to take these medications. They were obviously there for days, they were just letting it go. Okay, and if you're not proactive about this stuff before you get into the hospital, then it's going to have a really, really massive impact on both your quality of life and length of life. Okay, and I know this is in a very narrow-minded setting of a hospital, but you've got to really take this back and look at how people go through their day-to-day, right? They're getting awareness of they're low in energy, so they'll take another coffee rather than realizing that their body's not recovered, it's not healthy, right? They'll go to bed and they feel like they're not able to get to sleep. They feel agitated. They feel overwhelmed because they've been stressed out all day. They haven't nourished their body. They haven't taken that time to get to good sleep. And they'll use alcohol. They'll use some sort of melatonin or sleep drug to get to sleep, realizing they're still waking up tired, sluggish, and then repeating that cycle again. Taking that time to really step back and be proactive, ask those bigger questions and how you can actually improve your health, get things back on track is all up to you, because everyone's very keen to sell you another sleep supplement. But if you can't take that time to set up your schedule or make those tweaks to get things back on track, you're always going to be on the back foot. So taking that time to really look at your health seriously, and what can you do right now? Where do you feel like your health is leaning on those other areas of your life? Do you feel like there's a level of mental fog? Do you feel like your recovery is low? Do you feel like your sleep's off? All of those parts come from a lifestyle aspect first, right? You can always take a supplement and get the quick fix, but you're being reactive and you're not looking at the big picture, okay? So this comes into that patch fix aspect as well, okay? If you are watching along, give me a thumbs up on this one. It would be good to see how you're going and who's following along. The second one on this is probably the biggest part I want to go through in this whole training today, is getting an awareness of what food really is for the body. And without a doubt, food is the best medicine. But the problem is 99% of the population do not see it that way. And the medical system and the health system in general is one of them, okay? Going through and seeing what we were given for dinner and lunch and all these things, getting an awareness that the biggest goal of them seem to be, how can I make this feel like we're being nice to them and that it's like they're at home? And I understand that from a familiarity standpoint, but the problem is most people are in that hospital because what they eat at home has got them to the hospital, right? They're having ice cream every night, they're having crappy sandwiches and shit that is causing this level of toxicity and inflammation in the body. That is why they are there, okay? So coming into an hospital with something like an injury like I had, or the guy across the hall that had just had his hip surgery, the biggest goal and priority of a hospital should be, how can I get this person healthy? How can I get him out of the hospital feeling his best? That is not going to come from more dairy, more gluten, more crap that is making it so hard for his body or my body to repair. Okay, realizing that my dinner was, one slither of what was supposedly beef. I got a little bit of potato, but then I got, some yogurt. I got an ice cream. I got a sandwich of like really, really low quality bread. And I understand a big problem here is actually getting an awareness of their lack of budget in the medical system, right? And this could be a whole nother conversation, realizing that both the financial means to make this happen is so low, but also the focus of what really matters, right? We're all more than happy to get on another cholesterol statin drug, but we're not taking that time to really understand the deeper issue. And when we're looking at toxins and the inflammation levels in the body and intolerances are constantly coming through, right? Nobody understands that bloating is coming from food, and realizing that's one of the biggest issues, that you are constantly inflamed and these issues tend to come up, is really, really, really big. Okay. And the last one I put here was the protein intake, right? Most people's diet, 90% comes from carbohydrate. Their body's not able to rebuild. If you've just had a surgery or an injury or something coming through, you need a good amount of protein and your fats to be able to rebuild these tissues, right? Protein, those amino acids, those broken down versions of protein, are building blocks to build that tissue. If you do not have that present, you're going to be in the hospital bed longer. It's simple as that. So taking that time, as we said before, being proactive and actually looking at the bigger picture and understanding what it takes to get your body back on track. We need to look at this from a bigger understanding of how our body is healthy as a whole. If we're not healthy at a cellular level, really how our body functions, we're eating these crappy foods, we're looking at comfort food rather than looking at how we can lower inflammation and recover the body, we will be in that hospital bed longer. We'll be taking more painkillers, we'll be taking more medications that are not helping us actually recover. All right. So the top three, I've added in a couple here as, okay, Ollie, then what should I be eating? What should I be adding in? And I could go down a ton of different things with different supplements and foods that you should be adding in. But I think these top three could be really, really beneficial that you're probably not eating or taking, that could make a difference if you're in this mending process, right? So whether this be a case of some of the issues we're going to go through in regards to diarrhea, you've got sort of IBS at some level, you've got an injury like a tweaked hamstring or a sore lower back, or simply coming through from that brain fog and that constant sluggishness. These could be really, really helpful. Okay, so if you are in your 40s, 50s, or older, all three of these can be really, really helpful, and typically we recommend for our clients quite regularly because it can really help with this overall cellular health. Okay, so the first one here is collagen. And most people, as you would know, this is being marketed as a beauty product for skin and nails. And while that is also helpful, right, hair, skin, and nails, all of them require that collagen, is going deeper into that and realizing that glycine is a crucial amino acid that is missing in so many people's diets and tends to be diminished with age. The older and older we get, the harder and harder it is to get that level of glycine in our diet. So if we're not supplementing with it, we'll notice that in our bone strength, we'll notice that in our ligaments, our tendons, our muscle tissue, and our brain function, actually our brain plasticity. There's some really, really interesting research there. So adding in at least a glycine supplement, but ideally a collagen supplement, can be really, really helpful at trying to repair this tissue, get our joints and bones and everything back on track. It has made some huge, huge differences. The second one here is olive oil. And this one might sound really interesting. I think the big one here is, as always, understanding the quality rather than just taking another thing. because most oils in the supermarket are rancid before they even get off the shelf, right? They're plastic, clear containers. The oils are just soaking in these toxins, and you'd be more healthy not to take them. But if we can get a really high quality, dark glass container and allowing our body to really absorb the polyphenols and the natural nutrients that come from a high quality olive oil, this can have really good anti-inflammatory properties and really, really great for things like brain function and general cellular health. Okay, and then the last one is going to be turmeric. Most people here are going to notice that this is quite helpful for inflammation as well, or being anti-inflammatory in nature. So these would be top 3 that I'd give a recommendation as food is the best medicine. If from an injury prevention standpoint, from a recovery standpoint, are typically missing from most people's diets, that I think could be quite an easy install into being proactive around your health if these things are coming through. All right, hope that's helpful so far. Give me a thumbs up if you're with me there. Next one I want to dive into, and this was a little bit sobering for me, but getting awareness that I think at least 60-70% of the nurses and the healthcare professionals that were running around that hospital were obese. And when you realize they're supposed to be health professionals looking after other people's health, and you realize that this is the epitome of unhealthy, that really, for me, was really, really sobering. Okay, so I put 25% here. That is for males. Obviously, it'd be more 30 to 35% for females. But it doesn't matter how fit you are, right? If you're still running, you're doing triathlons, you're seeing, there's people finishing half Ironmans or even Ironmans, and they're still 30, 40 kilos overweight, right? There's an immense amount of fitness and an immense amount of mental fortitude there, but your body is still not healthy, okay? And if you're not taking that time to really get that body back in check, get that body fat back in check, you will always run into more complications, okay? It's a very, very easy one to see visually. If your body is not in check, you need to get that back, okay? And one of the biggest things here, that if you do have an extended stomach, you do have things that aren't working, I 100% guarantee that's showing up in your stress tolerance, that's coming up in your mental sharpness, that's coming through in your overall recovery, right? Because if you're obese or your body fat is quite high, you are unhealthy. You will have high levels of inflammation in your body, and inflammation is one of the biggest factors that's going to come into all health conditions, diseases, illnesses, and everything in between. So we need to get that body fat back in check. Okay. Another huge part of this that we could go really, really deep into, but it's getting an awareness of metabolic flexibility, right? If you're 99% of the population are metabolically inflexible, and their ability to use fats as fuel or anything other than carbohydrates is really, really poor, okay? So like I mentioned with things like your olive oil, the collagens, we're trying to really make sure that we're getting in high-quality nutrients our body can use other than just more potatoes and fries, right? We need to make sure if we can get our body to use fats effectively, not just fats, right? So we don't go to the other extreme and only ever do fats like a keto style, because that can be, we can actually get just as insulin sensitive and have just as much issues there. But being able to switch and to be able to use both carbohydrates and fats as fuel can make a huge difference at trying to get this mental sharpness back, to try bring the inflammation down, and obviously can moderate and control our body fat levels as well. All right, and I think one of the biggest things that comes through here quite regularly is even when people are fit, right, they're training a lot, but their body fat just won't move. Apart from that inflammatory and toxicity standpoint, which we touch on every week, it's getting this awareness that training and working hard is a stress. So if you're stressed out all day and then you go do more stress like a HIIT circuit or a run or a weight session, that can actually be more stress in the body. And if we don't take care of that, you're going to continue to go down this spiral. It will kill you, right? You need to take into account stress, whether that both be mental and physical stress. And I think that's where, unfortunately, things like doctors and nurses go wrong is because they're so understaffed, because they're so reactive in nature and looking after everyone's needs. That's why so many of them suffer with being overweight. Because even though they may know a thing or two about health, whether they do it or not is another story, but because they're overstressed, that body fat continues to accumulate. And they're only one example of so many in the business setting and the general life setting, as everybody is so stressed, so overrun with work, that it is one of the biggest things getting in the way of you being able to drop body fat, being able to get things back on track. Okay, so one more thing I'm going to dive into here, and I just want to say off the bat, this is something where it's purely my opinion. It's something that I want to give my ideas and thoughts on, but I'm not diagnosing this. I'm not disregarding what you're currently on, but I think it's really, really important to at least consider and then make your own educated guess. And it's an awareness around patch fixes. And the idea here, and these are, just a couple of thousands and thousands of different issues and things that are coming through that I think are being masked and being dealt with really, really poorly, okay? So things like depression, obviously there's genetic factors that come into this, there's environmental factors, there's all sorts of things. But when you bring it back to the basic level of understanding that depression coming through is typically a lack of serotonin in the body, our body just does not feel happy, we feel constantly low, you also realize that 90% of serotonin is made in the gut. And if we're constantly taking in sugars, we're never getting any vitamin D, we're never helping others, and we're focusing on what's happening to us, then we are always going to feel depressed. All right, and that might sound harsh, but that is a huge, huge lifestyle factor that needs to be taken into account before we look at medication, okay? And the problem is medication is given out like candy that our body is never given the ability to actually help, okay? So if you're in the position where you're feeling low, things aren't working like they used to, how can we make those tweaks and adjustments to make sure from a overall health level, we can really massively impact our levels of mood. And if we're constantly low, it can resolve in the gut. Another huge, huge part here that we're seeing come as a big trend is, men that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s and starting to get diagnosed a lot more with depression medication and realizing that a huge percentage of that actually have very low testosterone. And, we've done, trainings like this in the past, understanding that a huge part of that is this awareness of the toxins, the stress, the lack of sleep, lack of nutrition, all those other health things that we're continuing to talk about apply to, again, getting those testosterone levels back in check. But if your testosterone is really, really low, it's going to be directly impacting your mood, right? Hormones isn't just how you look, it's how you feel. And if your testosterone is low, you are going to feel low as well. Okay, the next one here is the diabetes. And it's really, really important to get an awareness around this one because obviously, if it's type 1 and it's something you've been born with or something that is sort of out of your control in that regards, then that is certainly a different story. But from a type 2 that's coming through each and every day, people are getting diagnosed with diabetes and getting an awareness that is 100% a lifestyle factor. If you're not taking the account to look at your sugar intake, to look at your stress, to look at your sleep, and modulating that, then just putting a insulin on top of that and continuing to eat the way you are is absolutely ridiculous to me. All right. And this showed up in one of the guys that was in hospital at the time and just bringing back the lollies, taking that time to just eat whatever. And then when the nurse came around with the insulin, it was good to go and get back on track. Every time they did their blood glucose reading, oh, no, it's high. We're just going to have to give another half hour and we can use some insulin. I'm like, dude, the guy is literally eating lollies in front of you. Like taking that time, again, to look at that food is medicine. The foods you eat are going to directly impact how your body feels and how that thing functions, all right? So it's got to be taken into account. If those things are coming up, we need to have a little deeper look, all right? The next one here, and we see this a lot coming through with our clients, is the IBS, IBD coming through, the irritable bowel syndrome, getting awareness of, really having issues with the digestive system. All it really comes back to is inflammation, right? Whether that be stress, whether that be food intolerances, whether that be a mixture of all these different things, it ultimately comes back to that inflammation response, okay? It doesn't matter what supplement you take, what drug you put on top, that will always be a patch fix when you're not looking at the deeper issue, okay? And obviously this starts to get to a level of autoimmune that is quite unhelpful, but we've got to realize that if we're not taking into account the foods, like every time we have that bit of gluten or every time we have that bit of dairy, if that's what you're flaring up to, that's going to be constantly flaring things up. It's going to make it even worse. It's going to cause that level of toxicity in the body that makes this cycle continue to repeat itself, right? And if you're just taking a medication that makes gluten better, but you continue to consume more gluten or whatever that thing is for you, then we need to realize that is one of the biggest issues with the medical system entirely, is not realizing that with lifestyle and nutrition, that is always going to be the biggest aspect that is 100% on you. And I can already understand why they do, is most people, unfortunately, will never follow through on the nutritional lifestyle prescribements like they will a pill. But if you're willing to and serious about getting your health back on track, this always comes from a deeper lifestyle level. Okay, and the last one here I use as another example, just so it's more than just a couple of these more diagnosed conditions. Things like sore hips, and they're going in for constant knee and hip surgeries. We see it all the time with middle age and older men. And obviously there is always going to be a level of degeneration as we get older. But if we're constantly playing squash every Thursday and then sitting on our ass every other day of the week, our knees are obviously getting absolutely battered, right? We're just putting all that weight on our knees. We're not taking any time to strengthen up any muscle tissue. And there's these constant imbalances, right? Our glutes aren't working. Our back's always overworking. Our quads are just smashing into those knees. And because there's so lack of muscle stability around them, we're just hammering joints into joints into joints, right? And there's like tons of examples here, but so many people I see could completely miss or cancel their surgery appointments if they just took that time to step back and strengthen and stabilize those muscles first, okay? Or at least delay it for another 10, 20 years rather than going full bionicle at 30 because they haven't taken that time to really strengthen things up. All right, so the biggest thing really here at the end of the day is just getting that awareness of if you want to be proactive, the amount of things you can fix are absolutely insane. All right, so to give you a little summary on what today's conversation, where today's conversation was really going, is just getting awareness of you have control. And as soon as you take yourself out of that control seat, you're on drugs, you're on medication, you're constantly looking for answers that you will never find. And if you want to take control of your health, and there's some of these things that are coming through, you've really got to take that time to build this awareness of pause. Really check in with yourself, reprioritize, get that body back on your side. There's no point doing well in your career or doing all these fancy things if your body is falling apart in the process. Okay, I was talking to a bloke just yesterday and I have these conversations every week. And he's talking about his multi-million-dollar company and he's starting up another one and he's all stressed and he's not sleeping. I'm like, mate, what is the point if your body is falling apart? There's no point if your body, you don't actually have a body that you can actually enjoy it in, okay? So get the stuff back on track, reprioritize, get your body back on that list, or you're not going to enjoy it anyway. All right, you've got to have recovery, okay? For our private clients, we call this parasympathetic days, giving ourselves time to really calm that nervous system down, regenerate these cells, get blood flow, but not breakdown, and trying to make sure we are giving that body time to heal and recover. Okay, the ability to perform is directly correlated with our ability to rest. Now, this one is huge for a lot of you. You're such givers. You're always helping so many other people, and it's incredible. But very regularly, we forget to put our own oxygen mask on first, right? And every time we get in that airplane, we get told we need to put our own oxygen mask on before we help out the one next to us. Yet in our day-to-day life, we're constantly helping and pouring into others, and we feel empty at the end of the day. If you keep doing that, you keep breaking down your body. You're not recovering. You're not showing up as your best, and you ultimately are not able to give and serve at the level you want to, because you constantly feel low, you feel drained. Okay, so we've got to really, it just comes back to that reprioritization. You've got to put yourself on that map. You've got to make sure you've got some time for you to get this body back on your side. All right, and this really comes in, whether that be time, money, or energy, you've got to invest into you. You've got to take that time to have someone in your corner, to have a plan, to have your nutrition on check, to just put some time aside to actually prepare some meals before you go to work, right? Rather than just running out and getting what you can and dealing with sushi or something for lunch. Invest that time into you so you can really show up. And the last one, if nothing else, throughout what I experienced through that whole experience and working with so many different professionals in so many different fields, is don't blindly follow instruction. Always take the time to follow up on their recommendations. Always take the time to read the downsides to what they're saying, right? Every drug is going to have a downside. What are they, and are you willing to sacrifice that for what you're getting? Okay, because there's so many people out there that are taking one drug for a small issue, and then they're taking 2 or 3 other things to combat the other side effects that come through. It just does not make sense. And if we could remove all of those, and we do this all the time with our clients, we see, okay, health's back in check. Okay, now sleep's back in check. Now all these things start to come back in a row. And now, hey, guess what? We don't need these medications. We feel fantastic. And I'm certainly not saying don't wipe them out. You've certainly got to make sure you take the time to get these things right. But understand that if you're just taking those instructions blindly, nobody should ever to respect your own health more than you. And if you're not taking that time to follow up on what's truly happening to your own body, then you're always going to be a victim to the system, okay? Take the time, take control of the steering wheel, and make sure that you can really, really move forward, all right? So it looks like this live stream worked. It was third time lucky, team. That's all I had for you today. It was great to see everybody's response. It was a bit of a big one with our weekend's events, and thank you for all of your comments and everything over the weekend, and everyone on the live here today. David, Alan, Inia, Stephen, good to see you. Victor, Gus, Tony, Shane. Yeah, we got tons on. Good. Well, awesome team. Well, I'm assuming there's no questions on that. It was kind of a different call today. Hope you found value in that. Hope that was. It gave some insight into maybe some concepts that maybe it just, to be honest, a lot of this stuff is never a huge new thing. It should be a reminder on what is really important and what you should truly take into account. And if you can do that, then we can help you. Okay, I hope you're all having an amazing week so far. I'm slowly healing. Things are getting better. I had a first acupuncture appointment today, and we are on the mend. So have an awesome rest of your week, guys, and we'll be back to it next week. Take care.